Hi, everyone. This is Hal Krosman with Screenwriting U, and today we're going to be talking about writing scary as hell horror scenes. Now, this really is, in real life, having something like any of these kinds of things happen to somebody is a real true tragedy. But when we're creating for horror audiences, this is one of the things they want to see. By the way, the other side of it is when you're having producers read your scripts, if you can build in these kinds of scenes, they will see you as an absolute professional. So let's just jump into this. We're going to do a bunch of things today. One of them is we're going to be talking about, how horror actually benefits producers, because that's probably who you're ultimately going to be selling to. I'll give you some steps that you can use to be able to create scary as hell horror scenes. And then we'll go through the Amanda bear trap or reverse bear trap scene step by step, so you can see exactly what they did to make that scene so amazing. And finally, we'll talk about the upcoming class on writing terrifying horror scripts that pretty much have a much better chance of you doing well in contest, and actually can give you a chance to be successful in getting a movie made. So that's our objective overall. So let's do this. This movie, and this is one of the keys and one of the reasons why I think horror movies are maybe one of the easiest there is to make a deal on, is because most horror movies are low budget, but they have tremendous upside. And let me just show you some of those examples. Paranormal Activity. The budget on it was $15,000, which is just almost unbelievable. Some people did a great job on being able to create that for an incredibly low budget, but it made back $193 million. And again, this is where horror has this unique thing that a lot of the other genres don't. Let's look at Blair Witch. Blair Witch is one of those movies everybody's heard of. And it started out with a budget of about $60,000. Actually, they did it for less than that. And then when the production company or when Artisan got a hold of it, they had to elevate the audio on it. So it ended up being $60,000. Box office was $248 million. Again, that's what we're looking at. Low budget, but with tremendous upside potential. Saw, $1.2 million was the budget, and the box office was $103 million. Now, based on the previous two, you might look at this and go, oh, that's not that much. But think about it this way. It made back 100 times the investor's money. That's wild. Friday the 13th, same kind of thing. Budget, $550,000. It ended up having a box office of actually probably $60 million there when you add it up. And again, that's 100 times the actual investor's money. So this is something that gives producers a reason to be looking at your horror movie, your horror script, in a completely different light, right? It has so much potential. And again, if it's written well, if it's designed to sell, if you've made all the right decisions and you've done some of the things we're going to look at today, you might have a real chance at that. You never know. So let's start with, and this is the Amanda bear trap scene. You start with a horror situation when you're writing something like this. And by the way, I'll tell you, in real life, people write in all kinds of different directions. And so I'm not saying this is the only way to do it, but what I will say is once you see our entire model on this part, you'll see why if you take these steps in this order, you have a much better chance of creating something that blows people away. So, and then we'll take a look at how they did this in Amanda. But here's the first part. All right, this is our example. And if we look at it from a horror situation perspective, the category is it's an isolated and tormented situation, right? She's isolated and she's being tormented. The situation, Amanda has a bear trap on her head and the key is in the belly of her cellmate. Now, just, those things right there, it's a bear trap on her head. That's actually pretty creative. But you add this second part in, and there's a whole other level at which this scene both grosses us out, freaks us out, and has us live in pretty much terror. The urgency, she has 1 minute before the trap kills her. If you didn't add in really either one of these things, I think this scene, might have been a completely different experience. What's the emotional arc? So we think about these scenes from an emotional perspective. So you're asking, what is the emotional range of this scene from beginning to end, right? Where does it start? Where does it end? And you can do that on lots of things. I believe anytime you're writing any scene, you should be looking at what's the arc of the scene. But in this kind of scene, especially, the emotional arc is critical to its success. So this one, you could be going from anxiety to shock, which, by the way, that's not what this is. You could be going from suspense to panic. You could be going from dread to hysteria. In this one, Amanda went from surprise to hysteria, right? And that's a pretty extreme emotional arc, but you're going to see how that showed up in just a moment. And by the way, just think about it for a moment. My hope is that you just watched that scene or you've watched it recently, and that you had a chance to see all of the emotions that showed up in the midst of that, right? And if that's true, start thinking, what was the emotional range? What did happen? How many different emotions did the audience experience during that single scene? And I'll tell you that at the end here. So once you figured out what the range is, then you want to sequence the horror emotions. So you're asking, what emotions occur between the beginning and the end? So we know what the ending is, right? We know where it begins. We know where it ends. What are the emotions that occur in between, right? And it could be any of these, right? These are all horror emotions: apprehension, shock, or surprise, shock, fear, suspense, dread, anguish, panic, horror, hysteria. In the best scenes, you're going to see a lot of those emotions show up. And my question for you, by the way, right now is, do you know how to create each one of those? And not just having the character experience it, but having the audience experience it, because that's going to be one of the big keys to your success. So when we get to Amanda, I want you to watch how those emotions are sequenced, and you'll see what I'm saying on this. Number 4, then you give each emotion a physical representation. Now, you may have already thought, you may have originally come up with the idea for the scene, and as you were thinking about it, you started thinking about the emotions that show up, maybe, or maybe you went straight to the physical representation. Somebody's going to be banging on the door. We're all scared. Then they're going to start kicking the door in and yelling and screaming and shooting holes through it. And then finally they're going to get through. And now we go into the full out horror, right? Maybe you went from the physical to the emotional. What we're talking about doing here is there's another way, which is going from the emotional to the physical. So you look at the emotions, the emotional sequence that you created, and you say, what's the physical representation for each of those emotions? So it's a unique way to brainstorm that pretty much guarantees the audience is going to experience those emotions. They're not manufactured. So then you list the emotions in sequence, and again, brainstorm the physical way that that emotion could show up. So you'll see this. Each emotion in the Amanda scene has a strong physical representation. And when you look at it, when you watch it from the perspective I'm going to be giving you in just a moment, you will very likely experience all those emotions. I just watched it just before we got on here. And so I'm right now in the middle of, I'm a little traumatized, but that's what that particular scene does. And if you have 4 or 5 of those in a strong horror movie, those 4 or 5 are going to get you exactly what you need. You don't have to have every scene. In fact, if you had every scene being something that would do all the stuff we're talking about, that would be too much. You've got to give an audience a chance to relax, to recover, to think they're okay, and then you hit them again. So, and then you add in the scares, the dilemmas, the releases. And again, I'll show you that, but let's just talk about what these are. Scares happen when something unknown startles you. So you could have everything from, the kind of trick scares where it's like, oh, something jumped up at me. And then it turns out to be a cat, right? And that's the release. But so it could be just something like that, or it could be something startling you that is so much more dangerous. Dilemmas require that the character make a choice between 2 terrible outcomes. Now, this is for horror. If you're looking at a dilemma like in a drama, they're actually making a choice between 2 very difficult emotional outcomes. But for horror, you want to take it to that level. So, and then releases happen when we have that feeling that everything is all right, even if it isn't. And that's part of really great horror writing, being able to create the situation where the audience goes, oh, it's okay. And it turns out the thing that they thought made it okay is actually the thing that makes it even more horrific. So there's lots of cool things you can do with horror that I think, you may not be able to do with other genres. So it's one of the reasons why I really love kind of horror writing. I don't necessarily love sitting in a theater being scared to death, but I know that there are a lot of people who do, and that's why they go to a horror movie. I interviewed a bunch of diehard horror fans, and one of the things they said basically, when you go to a rom-com, you're going there to experience falling in love again, right? And you're going there to go through all the emotions that you experience falling in love. They said when you go to a horror movie, they're going there for the same thing. They're going there for that emotional journey and having a chance to experience all of this unique and interesting and compelling horror emotions that go with that. So that's our job, right? That's our whole purpose here. So let's look at the Amanda Beartrap scene. And by the way, let's give credit. It was written by Leigh Whannell and James Wan, both of who have gone on to make multiple huge horror movies. These 2 guys came from nowhere, as in, and I don't mean their location was nowhere. Their location was Australia, which is a great place to go. And I think many people love living there. But they essentially were unknowns in this industry. And they came in with an incredible horror movie that gave them a career that's like, in the top 5% or 10% of horror writers. So, and part of it was this scene. So let's just see how this works out. I'm going to give you a scene description and then the emotion so you can experience it. So we start over here. Let me get out of the way, actually. We start over here at the police station. Lawrence is being interviewed, and he's asked to watch the interview with Amanda, the only surviving victim of the Jigsaw killer, right? So at that point, we probably feel some sympathy for Amanda and curiosity, right? What are we gonna find out? This is the only person who survived the Jigsaw killer. What are we going to learn in the midst of that? Then it cuts to, while Amanda's telling us the story, the abandoned building. She wakes up strapped to the chair. Her head is covered by a reverse bear trap. And at that point, I would say we're feeling suspense, maybe a little bit of fear. Probably also, again, more curiosity. What is this? But it's already looking scary. Third thing, a monitor turns on. Jigsaw's creepy doll explains the rules of the game. If she doesn't find the key in time, from the stomach of a dead cellmate, her jaw will be ripped open. Now, at that point, I would say we're experiencing apprehension, suspense, right? What's going to happen here? We've just seen a video of that. Amanda, at that point, it's like we see the video where the trap explodes. It destroys the plaster head. That's where Amanda's headed. And at that point, she goes into terror. And my guess is we're feeling a little bit of that. It's like, what's going to happen here? Amanda starts utterly freaking out, struggling to break free from the chair, right? And I would say that's some serious panic. And again, the more we're connected to this character, the more we're going to feel that. From there, she gets out of the chair, but that immediately starts the timer of the reverse bear trap. I want you to see what just happened there. She escaped, and we might have thought it's going to be fine, but at that moment, it caused the next stage to happen. Now we have more suspense and panic because we're worried what's going to happen, and she knows she's got 1 minute. Amanda says, and then I saw the body, and we see her approaching this man lying on the ground. At this point, I would say there's the experience of dread, right? It's like she knows she's got to get that key out of his body somehow. That in itself is that way. But also, even if you were approaching a dead body, wow, I would say dread would be a natural experience there. She sobs, realizing what she must do. So now she's in anguish, and she's in anguish because she's about to do damage to another human being who doesn't deserve it. So that then brings us to, she picks up the knife, trembling, sobbing, while the timer continues to run. So that timer, we've got heavy suspense here. And at this moment, I was just watching in a couple minutes right before we got on. And I'll tell you, at this moment, I'm sitting there going, wow, your timing is ticking down, man. You can't hesitate. You got to do something. And that's, suspense. Then the man wakes up. He's alive. He stares helplessly at Amanda. Can't do a thing. Her eyes go wide. She knows it's her life, his life or hers, whatever way. So she's in this dilemma, and she's in, I'd say, actually a very morbid dilemma. This isn't a place I think any human being wants to be. At that point, she makes the decision. She raises the knife, screams as she stabs him over and over and over again. She's in pure hysteria. She then fishes through the bloody guts, which is a truly disturbing scene. She struggles in the slippery conditions. She finds the key, right? She gets it into the lock. Here we're experiencing disgust. And again, I'm just saying, I just watched it. That's what I experienced at that moment. She gets the trap off just mere seconds before it triggers. She screams and sobs. We have a release at this point. Now, I'll say, by the way, there is a release because it's like, okay, she lived through that trap. It didn't blow her head apart, but she had to do something really, really disturbing to do it, but there's still a release there. The creepy doll comes in, says, congratulations, you're still alive. Most people are so ungrateful to be alive, but not you, not anymore. And this gives us the moral message. And by the way, in horror, there is often a moral message. It's the one kind of redeeming thing that it does for us. And now we cut back to the police station and Amanda says, he helped me. So this gives us the moral meaning, right? Amanda went through this situation and it changed her in some way. There's one more thing that this scene does. Watching the interview, Lawrence is horrified, but here's what that does. That sets up Lawrence cutting off his foot later in the movie. If this scene hadn't occurred for Lawrence, he may not have chosen to cut off his foot in the end, right? This scene gave us all kinds of things. It gave us the rules. It gave us, how this works. It gave us the experience of what a character is going through in the midst of this. It showed us how the creepy doll, the jigsaw killer, actually thinks. He thinks he's doing something good. And this is kind of our first experience of that. And it set up what is to come. So it wasn't just Lawrence cutting off his foot. It was pretty much, we know from this scene what almost every character is going to go through who is up against this kind of thing. So incredible, I would say incredible writing. But I want you to notice every action had an emotion. Every action caused us to feel something. Every step of it was designed to cause a change for the audience, right? And this is what our horror movie model is about. What you just saw was I would say, a really strong example of great horror. And I'm saying that because I think one of the easiest ways to master this stuff is to really look at those great examples and to analyze them and to understand them at a very, very deep level. Creating this way requires higher level skills. I think there's a lot of people who think, oh, I'll just go with the ideas that pop into my mind and that'll be enough. I'm going to tell you, I've worked with Sean Cunningham, the producer of Friday the 13th. I've worked with a couple of other horror writers who have had movies made, and I would say they're thinking on a different level. So what we try to do, and this is our job, is to make it as easy as possible for you to learn how to do any of these skills at a higher level, at a level that people will consider you to be a pro. And in this case, it's about horror. So hang with me for a couple of minutes. Let me just walk you through some of the skills that are necessary as we talk about this upcoming class. And I'll give you a list on the right-hand side here, what those skills are. But when we first created this, originally I thought, okay, there's going to be some things we're going to learn along the way. And in the midst of doing interviews with pros, in the midst of working with a development team, in the midst of analyzing about 50 horror movies and the most important parts to them, what we found was almost every step of the model, I had breakthroughs. Almost every step of the model, our development team had breakthroughs, and people who have gone through this class have had the same experience. So here's the lessons. And these are really the steps in which I would create. You start with your concept, right? What's your big idea that this movie's about that has a chance of selling. A lot of people will have the same concept they've seen over and over and over again. And that doesn't do it. You need to be thinking outside that box. But the other thing is the conventions, right? It's like the conventions, the horror conventions, if those aren't honored, you're in real trouble. We had someone who had a great horror concept, and she, in the end, she wanted to make everything better. So she made the final act something where the characters finally kind of came to a nice resolution instead of going through the big horror beforehand. And every producer she sent it to turned it down because of that. So this would have made a huge difference for her. Second, then you're looking at your monster and making sure that that monster delivers on the primal fears, right? And this means that you are creating with that monster. It's not just this scary looking thing. It is designed to go right to the worst fears human beings have, so that you're engaging them on that deep emotional level. Then it's about the characters. And in horror movies, pretty much there are survivors and victims. Other than your bad guy, which we're going to talk about in just a moment, the monster. But you want to look at these and think about them in certain ways so that they become somebody that the audience is connected to. Then it's about building your plot. And I want you to see how we build a horror plot. It is a little different than I think how you might build other genres plots. So we do it through 4 different tracks. First one is the horror situation track, right? What are the situations that you're going to put in front of the audience? And where do you put those in the story? And there's a lot to this, but that's just the simple version of that. Then it's the character death track. Who dies, when, and why? Now, the audience doesn't need to understand why, but you do. And how you choose when they die has an impact on the audience, and it has an impact on the story. Then it's the monster reveal track. When do we see the monster? How much of the monster, right? Because there are some movies where we just see little glimpses of the tail or something. And it, in a horror situation, it's like, okay, that can be pretty scary. There are some movies where you see the monster in the very first scene, and it's way worse than you ever thought. And then you find out things about them. It's important that you make these decisions. And then the character journey track. And there are some people who have told me before that, well, in horror movies, characters don't have journeys. I'm going to tell you, once you understand this, you will see that pretty much every character that has any kind of impact in this story has a journey. And once you understand how those horror journeys work, you will build those in. It will make those characters so much more engaging to an audience. It will have them identify with them. It will have them go through emotional experiences that they might not have experienced otherwise. Now, notice number 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 are all about building that horror plot. And when you do it this way, what happens is every single scene contributes to the value of this story. They're not just, scenes where we just cut away and other things are happening. There's so much that you can build into every one of those scenes. I think there's much more depth in a great horror movie than some of the other genres. So, and then 9, 10, and 11, these lessons, you're going to get something you will have never seen before, which is we're not only going to take you through the different emotions. Remember all these horror emotions that you just saw? I'm going to give you a 1-sentence definition of each one of them so that you instantly understand what they're about, right? And then I will give you a one-sentence how-to so that you know exactly how to create that experience for the audience. Now, if you look at these emotions, like if we go to anguish, for instance, do you know what anguish is? Could you, in one sentence, explain it and have everybody in the room instantly get it? And can you tell us exactly how to cause it in the moment? Right? And it's like every one of these, there's like you could have a character acting hysterical. I saw an indie movie where they did that, and it was like, I don't know why she's doing that. Why is she screaming again? And then again, and then again. And it's having that character act that way didn't cause the audience to experience it for 1 second. That the director who wrote that movie had no idea how to create hysteria for an audience. You will. By the time you're done with these lessons, you will understand more about creating these horror emotions than probably 98% of the writers out there. Then 20 scares and creepy moments. Now, the reason why we're giving you these is so every scene, every horror scene you write will be different. It will be unique in its own way, right? When you add this particular horror monster, right? These unique horror situations you've created, the different emotional sequences you've created, and then these scares and creepy moments. You put all of that together and you're going to have incredible horror scenes. From there, then it's lesson 13, which is the one we did half of today. So what you saw today was half of the scary as hell horror scenes. The other half will shift how you write, really. And there's a whole bunch of things in here that will help you be a better writer in any genre you write. But when we get to this scary as hell horror scenes, this will, again, change how you write big horror movies. And then it's turning up the heat. And finally, how do you keep it low budget and marketable? It's easy to put in lots and lots of special effects that aren't necessary. Like this particular scene that we just saw, I don't think it was special effects that did that. It was written incredibly well by writers who had thought through all the things that we're talking about. This will make a tremendous difference in your ability to write horror, and you never know what that might do for your career and for who you are as a writer. Now, I told you I'm going to give you a special. This class begins on May 29th. And that gives you a little bit of time to brainstorm some ideas and figure out what you want to write. You can either come in with a brand new idea and just go straight through the class, which is, I think, the best way to do it. Go straight through the class and create every one of these in that particular project. Doing that is going to give you something absolutely amazing. Or you can come in with a script you've already written, or a script you've already written, and use each one of these to elevate that part and do a complete rewrite. And you could take something that you already love, that is well written, and double or triple the quality from a horror perspective, and end up, again, having a real chance. So the normal price on it's $199. This is for the first 20 writers. You guys know how our system works. First 20 writers are going to get this special. You'll get in for $99. So if you liked the way we thought, the way we just designed and analyzed the Amanda scene, I want you to know that kind of thinking is built all the way through this program. This program turned out to be 3 times as good as I thought it was going to be. And the reason why was because we had a great development team, and we were all willing to analyze things at a deeper level than we ever had. You will get the benefit of what was almost a year's worth of work where we were analyzing constantly. You will, inside of 1 month, be somebody who's on the other side of that and able to do all the things we just talked about. So if horror is something you want to do, whether you've written any horror or this is your first one, come join us. if you want to do it and you're sure you want to do it, I'd say jump in right now, sign up. All you got to do is go to this link and make sure you're one of those first 20. If you miss the first 20, the price will bump up, but I promise you it is still worth it. This program will save you years of trying to learn this on your own. It'll take you right to the professional level solutions, and you'll get them. So if that's important to you, come join us. Again, all you got to do is just write this link down, bit.ly, bit.ly /horror sign up, HORROR sign up. Just write that down, put it in your browser where you normally put a web address, click return, and that'll bring you to the horror sign up, and that'll get you started. So, and by the way, again, my promise to you is you will absolutely love what you learn in this class. The people who have gone through it have told me they were blown away by it. So if you want to master horror, this is a great way to do it. And if you just want to improve your ability to write, this is going to take you through ways of thinking about writing that are totally professional. So with that, listen, thank you guys for being with me today. I hope you enjoyed analyzing the Amanda scene. I hope you got something out of that. And again, if you join us for this, I promise you, you are going to love what you learn, what it does for your writing, and what it does for the script that you're writing. So with that, this is Hal Croasmun with Screenwriting U, wishing you the absolute best on your writing. Bye-bye, everyone.